Hi, so I wanted to record one last video and have one last opportunity to talk with everybody before we were done, before it's just finals week and you are turning in your essays and I'm grading things and we're trying to just finish everything up. So, what a wild ride, man. We in this term with a world that looks very different than when we started this term. And I know that it's probably caused a lot of stress and anxiety and fear for a lot of people between a global pandemic and a current revelation, one of the thousands that we actually see if we pay attention to the systemic problem of racism in our culture, in our country. So it's definitely a time of great change. I would hope that you would see your studies here not as a distraction from the current events, but actually as a way to take them in, analyze, and respond to the world around you. The thing about English classes is that while it might seem to be about reading essays and talking about Shakespeare or whatever, stereotypes you think a college English class, presents, it's not. It's really a thinking class. And learning how to think clearly is one of the most important things you can do for yourself and for the world around you. So, anyways, you should know what final assignments are left. You should have finished up the last swerve discussion post today. Essay 4 is due on Monday, and the essay final, the self-assessment, reflection is due on Wednesday. Both of those things, Monday and Wednesday, are due at 9:30. So what do we do in this class? I kind of wanted you to think about this one last time. We read The Swerve. I know it was a book that may have caused some confusion at first, but hopefully you understood what you were getting out of reading it. We learned about, really, it's a survey of our Western cultural history of literacy. Who reads, why do they read, and what do they get out of it, starting with the Greeks and the Romans. We learn about the development and the transmission of book culture. I think that's really interesting because that applies to your whole academic career, right? You don't have to be in English, obviously, to read a book. Most of college depends on it. And that dependence on the circulation of ideas through print and now electronic text is so vital to what we do. And this book is really about the development of that culture. You also got an overview of the conflict between religious dogma that we saw through the Catholic Church of Paul Joe's time, and the conflict between those ideas, those faith-based ideas, and the struggle for scientific advancement. And that still as relevant today as it ever has been. If you look at global warming and the way that people dispute whether or not that's real and whether or not humans have the obligation to respond to that is a beautiful, well, not beautiful, but brutal, poignant, perfect example of that. We also learn how to write in 4 different genres that are actually really important. The first essay, Remembering Event, may have just seemed like tell me a story, but it's not. It's really about learning how to share a meaningful experience to a general audience and to do it in a professional manner. You learn how to do a profile, which is learning how to showcase a member or a facet of society, a person that is worth learning about, or an institution, or a phenomenon, an activity. You learn how to academically explain an idea in the explaining a concept paper, and you learn how to fairly and clearly understand an argument, some debatable idea, and how to frame it in academic terms and explain it with academic clarity. And that's really important because I wanted to ask the rhetorical question, why does this all matter? Why would you need to take English 1A and then 1B and 1C? It's easy to get sidetracked by this idea that it's about grammar, commas and apostrophes and punctuation errors and, you know, MLA formatting and stuff like that. It does matter. And I've made the argument that it's important to be able to pay attention to details. And those people who pay attention to details will have the cleanest punctuation, formatting, stuff like that. But that's, that's the nuts and bolts. That's the trees. What is the forest when we stand back? Beyond thinking about your grade in this or any other class, beyond thinking about reading novels and essays and all that you would, particularly do in an English class, being in a class like English 1A and then 1B that you're going into, as I mentioned earlier, they're thinking classes. You're learning how to think. It's so much more important than just what grade you get or what books you read in any particular course. Actually, everything you do here in an English class goes beyond even your time in college overall. I believe that what we're doing here in any class that teaches you how to be a better thinker, you're learning how to be a functioning member of society. And to be a functioning member of society, you have to be informed. You need to know where to find information and how to evaluate it. And you need to be able to think clearly about what you know and what you feel and what you believe. By doing this, we become what's called a public intellectual, that we are intellectuals that perform our ability to analyze ideas in public. I don't mean like you sit on like a street corner and you're like, spouting your truth to people. I mean that we are engaged in this. Like I've been saying this whole term, that you're writing for a public audience. You're not writing for a small group of friends or your journal, your diary, right? The whole point is to present what you know and to participate in these discourses publicly so that you can be informed by, but also transform the society that you're part of and all the different cultures and subcultures that you may be part of and feel an investment and obligation to be in conversation with. So we have to be able to dissect and discuss contentious ideas, but we have to be able to do that ethically and logically. When it comes down to it, I want you to be able to have intellectual curiosity, pursue ideas with intellectual humility, and in the end, know that it's more important to side with facts than just your feelings, right? Your feelings matter, and you do have to pay attention to them. But we can't allow our feelings, which change moment by moment, to dictate our worldview. You have to let your facts shape your worldview and not let your feelings shape what you take to be fact. I want to end on one note here. I talked about Notes of a Native Son in our first unit, Remembering Event, and I asked you to read it for extra credit. There's that essay by James Baldwin. For those who read it, this will be familiar. For those who did not, then I implore you to read it. I actually suggest that everybody, when you're done with this term, you might want to go back to that essay because it's ever more relevant today than it was 8 weeks ago when I asked you to read it. At the end of the essay, Baldwin is sitting with himself, shocked, horrified, angered, dejected by what he's learned about the world in front of him and how much better he understands his father now that he has encountered, that Baldwin himself has encountered, the world that his father was so hurt by and which made him so angered. And James Baldwin, wants to figure out how to react to this world. And he says, it began to seem that one would have to hold in the mind forever two ideas which seemed to be in opposition. The first idea was acceptance, the acceptance totally without rancor of life as it is and men as they are. In the light of this idea, it goes without saying that injustice is a commonplace. But this did not mean that one could be complacent, for the second idea was of equal power, that one must never in one's own life accept these justices as commonplace, but must fight them with all one's strength. This fight begins, however, in the heart, and it had now been laid to my charge to keep my own heart free of hatred and despair. And I think that's what it comes down to, is to recognize that we have to do everything we can to create a world that is just and compassionate, and if you can do so, loving. And that you have to take that anger and that fear and channel it into the desire and momentum for change. But you have to do so, in my opinion, and in Baldwin's opinion, without letting yourself become chewed up and destroyed by the anger that is caused by that injustice in the first place. It's a dark note, perhaps, to end the class with, but it's also one of power and of social responsibility and potentially of hope, because we have to believe that there is a better world that we can create. And when it comes down to it, that's all you can do, is to keep your heart free of hatred, but also keep your mind focused on what you can learn and what you can say and what ideas you can share to make the world a little bit fairer, a little less contentious, and a little bit more worth living in for every one of us. It's been an honor and a pleasure working with all of you. If you have questions, you know where to get a hold of me. Feel free to talk with me after the term. I would love to talk about your classes, about ideas in English, about ideas that just pertain to college in general, or just about life. I hope you've had a great term, and take care.